Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
Hi, we welcome you to our podcast On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. My name is Kanika Goswami and I'm the managing editor of On.media's 6 B2B enterprise technology publications. We have engaging conversations with global thought leaders and industry experts on our podcasts, which reach over 1.3 million leaders worldwide. A new study by the BPI Network and Growth Officer Council entitled The Pathway to GenAI Competitive Advantage examines the state of data readiness in the rapid development and advancement of GenAI value creation. This report focuses on how organizations can achieve competitive advantage with GenAI and drills into business model variances and regional geographic contrasts. We have with us today Tom Kaneshige. He is a Chief Content Officer at the BPI Network, and David Gould. He is a Chief Customer Officer at EncompaaS. These leaders would be speaking to us on the topic, the pathway to GenAI competitive advantage. Welcome to the show, David and Tom. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure. Short introductions to both of you. Tom is a Silicon Valley native and has covered the intersection of business and technology for 20 years as an award-winning journalist at IDG, CIO Magazine, InfoWorld. I think CIO Magazine and InfoWorld are both a part of IDG Media. Sorry, Informer, Penton, and TechTarget, and as a senior analyst at Forrester Research. At BNI, Kaneshige heads a team that produces research report, among other content. David is an executive leader with a deep expertise of the content services, privacy, and compliance markets. Hi, both of you. Good to have you here with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Would you like to share something about the report before we ask the questions?
Sure. Let me jump in. Since we sponsored it, and this is something that we do day in and day out. Every enterprise that we talk to, starting at the C level down to the working level, the management level, are all abuzz about GenAI. You know, in our sense, and I've been around in the industry for 25, 30 years or more, this is probably the most transformative piece of technology that we've seen hit the enterprise in that time. And the expectations from the transformative capability of GenAI are through the roof. And what we've noticed up front is that the expectations are so high, and the fact that this is not a black box technology where you plug in a cord on one end and outcome's really great, business outcome on the other. There are some really significant issues that have to be considered to make GenAI truly successful and to meet those business expectations. As a result of that, we've worked with BPI Network to get some thoughts on where the industry is in the state of GenAI, specifically around what we call AI data readiness. Is the data good enough to produce the business outcome to meet the expectations of GenAI? So I'd like now to turn it over to Tom, maybe to spend just a couple of minutes talking about some of the key findings, and then we can entertain your questions, Kanika.
Yes, Tom, would you like to tell us something about it?
Sure. So we have some very significant findings. Probably the two biggest are that nearly 80% of business leaders said they expect GenAI to deliver a competitive advantage over the next 18 months. This means that GenAI's business value is going to go beyond, efficiency gains in processes to becoming a real game changer for innovation. And we have some examples of that we can get into later. The second significant finding is that to get to this value, you need to have a strong foundation in data AI readiness. And the problem is that 60% of our business leaders told us that they lack confidence in their data AI readiness. And that's largely stemming from half of them are actually not satisfied with the value they're getting from their current GenAI projects. So those are our two key findings.
Right. So the first question is going to be exactly what you just said about it. How do organizations achieve competitive advantage using GenAI? According to the report, generically, there is so much that can be said, but what does your report say? What should be the strategy?
So what companies need is a spark if they're trying to get into this, to get to that GenAI value. And they need to find a use case or something they couldn't do before, or something really exciting, then do the heavy lifting to get it to work. So my example for this, that's also in the report, is the NSW Department of Planning, Industry, and Environment. So they found a highly manual, slow process where a user that's seeking specific information had to wait a couple of days to get it, right? So the department started a GenAI project. It wasn't easy. It required restructuring the management of information, integrating data silos, using consistent data sets, and especially getting everyone across different regions on the same page. But it ended up reducing the wait time to within 10 seconds. So you've gone from a couple of days to 10 seconds. And this built trust in GenAI among employees and users, and really opened the floodgates to other GenAI projects. So employees today are now coming up with their own ideas because they're so excited about what this can do. And this is just a way to gin up excitement and get on the path to GenAI.
I can provide a real life example. We have a customer, a very large global pharmaceutical organization, where this company goes out and recruits the smartest and brightest people from major universities in the U.S. to come work for them. They assign them really important business tasks. I'm not talking about the research side of the business. I'm talking about the business side of the business. And what do they end up doing? 80%, 90% of the day, they're looking through business contracts, manually extracting information out of those contracts, putting them into a spreadsheet, and then trying to do some analytics around what they're finding. And this is a very tedious, very time-consuming process. And with using very sophisticated AI technology, what we've been able to help them do is actually automate that entire process, where the AI is going through these contracts, extracting very specific data elements, and putting it into a highly visual dashboard that allows them, just as Tom said, within seconds to be able to understand what their business position is on any specific business contract, or grouping the business contracts together and looking up rolled up data. So what these employees have been able to do, have really been able to, instead of spending 80% doing the heavy lifting and 20% doing the strategic analysis, we've been able to actually reverse that paradigm, where now 80% of their time is spent on strategic analysis and understanding the business contracts better, and only 20% or even less than that now is really on the heavy lifting.
Right. So would you like to add something to that, Tom? Or my next question is about the business model variances and regional or geographical contrasts when it is being used. Do you think some geographies are having a better rate of adoption, or are able to use GenAI more efficiently for their business processes? Do you think certain sectors take precedence? Do you think some sectors are still lagging? An overall view of that.
So our report broke out some industries, broke out B2B, B2C, and also regions. So an interesting finding on the regional breakout was among North American respondents, 50% were confident in their data AI readiness, and 62% were satisfied in the value they're getting from current GenAI projects. So those are some really good numbers. Let's compare them to Asia Pacific, and only 13% of APAC business leaders are confident in their data AI readiness, and only 16% are satisfied with the value from current GenAI projects. That's a massive gap, right? So 50% to 13%, and 62% to 16%. So there's a big opportunity for Asia Pacific companies to close the gap.
Just let me add to that. In my experience in talking to C-level employees over the last 5 years and watching kind of a personal transformation that these people have, the biggest issues 3 to 4 years ago were on the concept of explainable AI. How do I know that the answer that's coming off the algorithms is the right answer? And believe me, as an industry veteran, when I started working with supervised machine learning technologies to do content analytics, 15, 20 years ago, it was so hard for me to stand up in front of an audience and they say, well, how do we know that's the right answer? And I basically say, well, that's our secret sauce. So if I tell you this, I have to kill you kind of thing. And we were never really able to explain what that business outcome was and why. And so we've seen a big transformation over that. The world of open AI and the way we use it is specifically, you get an answer as to why this content was actually chosen. And the content that's chosen is really important in AI, Gen AI especially, because if you don't really understand the context, if you don't have content that supports the context of this problem that you're trying to solve, you really run into significant problems. And that's also, as Tom pointed out in the survey, compounded significantly by, especially in Asia Pacific and Europe, issues around domain sovereignty of the data, compliance issues, privacy issues. And so this is not just a matter of finding data, putting it into a model, and out comes a great answer. There are so many other considerations. Now, the good thing is I think people are thinking about AI way differently today than they were 3 or 4 years ago. Another anecdote I have is I remember going to a major international automotive manufacturer, and we were talking about using AI to help understand business content and do analytics on that content. And they basically told us that this is 2 or 3 years ago. Well, we really don't trust AI to do things like data classification. And I go, how can that be when you're putting AI in a car today and helping me change lanes safely going 75 miles an hour? You're not really giving me, why wouldn't you trust a system that does data classification to give you a great business outcome? Those days, to take the analogy one step further, are really in the rearview mirror. And now we're really at a point where we're seeing C-level executives specifically, mandating, hey, how am I going to be able to, for example, report to my board and to our share owners how we're using generative AI to help improve our business operations. But again, as I said before, the expectation is that it's a black box and you plug it in. And without having really, really strong data readiness, the outcome is not going to meet the expectation. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that. I mean, in the report, the trust issue kept coming up again and again. And even though a lot of what David was saying is in the rearview mirror, there is a danger that if you take the shortcut and don't do the things that you need to do to get your data AI ready, then you're going to have less accurate, less reliable answers to the Gen AI prompts, and trust or lack of it can really make or break these Gen AI projects.
And just add a quick point there. The other thing that's really critical here, in addition to geography, in addition to compliance, in addition to privacy, the real wild card in AI data readiness involves the use of unstructured content as opposed to structured content. When you talk to a chief data officer and you ask them, do you have AI ready data? Their context, their frame of reference is really on rows and columns based data. And there's been tons of investment around data governance around that content. But some of what I would call the real gems, the real key things, content that's embedded in contracts, content that's embedded in requests for proposals, those kinds of things, those are all in the unstructured world. And the tooling that's already being used for data governance on the structured side is not really up to speed or capable of doing the kind of data readiness that's required to make GenAI successful for unstructured content.
So data becomes a very big issue, when you're talking about Gen AI and its use for enterprises. There are a lot of things associated with AI when it comes to data analysis, let's put it. Probably ethical AI. Sorry, what about compliances? So are we taking into consideration all of those things? Because data privacy is a big thing across, various parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very critical issue. I mean, compliance and privacy are really important, especially when it comes to unstructured content. If you're doing a generative AI program analyzing company travel expenses, for example, and the CEO of your business, she or he has their passport photo in a file system somewhere as a backup, because it's required internally. And if you don't have that marked or labeled, that piece of specific data tagged as private, it ends up in the data pool, which becomes part of the analysis. And who wants, their CEO's passport photo to become part of it? I mean, this is even expense reports in a project like that. If the CEO or a senior level executive is out doing, an acquisition, a hot top secret project, for example, and all of a sudden, wow, I didn't realize the CEO was in this town. What does that mean? These are the things that surface without data readiness. And so the ability to do that, and this cannot be done manually. And that's the other thing that's really critical here, because in the unstructured world, you have petabytes of content out there. So while you need those petabytes to fuel a better business outcome, you also need to use AI actually to prepare the data for AI use. And that is a key finding, I think, that in my mind is really critical in terms of how companies need to move forward here.
So do you think this lack of confidence in the data readiness, or the ability to structure data, or the ability to identify the right data, is going to impact the adoption of Gen AI for enterprise use, especially for B2B organizations?
Yeah, I mean, that's happening already today. I mean, we're seeing Gartner's published some very interesting reports on that, and they're saying that 60% of generative AI projects, when they move to production, fail. And the reason they fall over, because the data is not capable of supporting the business outcome that's desired. And so that is kind of a really, really important concept. I don't know if you want to add to that, Tom.
It's just a scary stat.
It's true.
So I do want to add, there have been, my sources have told me time and again that there is an underestimation of what's needed to get this lift.
Would that also be one of the reasons for this inequitable adoption of Gen AI across continents, countries, geographies, economies, and enterprises? Because APAC may not be very data ready as of now. We do not have too many data compliance laws. Would that be one of the reasons why US is doing better, or maybe EU is also doing better, because they do have AI AI compliances as well in place, right?
Yeah, a lot of this goes, to geography and the culture of that geography. I think that if you look at some of the great waves of technical transformation over the last 15 years, the North American continent has always been usually the fastest adopter of that technology. And so I think what we're seeing, especially in the outcome of the report that Tom's organization has produced, is that it really mirrors, I think, the traditional kind of focus of how technology is adopted globally. But to your point, I think the compliance laws are different, privacy laws are different, but I think this also goes a lot to the organizational culture. There's a huge impact of culture on all of this. And, whether people trust things, obviously the trust issue is at the top of the list. And, the ability, who's going to be the first the first responder or the first leader into some new technologies. And I think what we're seeing globally from a geographic perspective is certainly playing out in the world of Gen AI, just as it did in cloud computing, big data, and some of the major sea changes that we've seen over the last 20 years.
Just to add to that, yeah, the culture is extremely important because as Gen AI moves beyond efficiencies and gets into really some innovative use cases. I mean, if you think about that, the risk factor is considerable, right? Because it's one thing to to do things more efficiently and maybe reduce the manpower or do more with less. But it's quite another thing to kind of reimagine those business processes to deliver outcomes that have never been done before.
That's completely right. So, and this question I had not included in the list, but just out of curiosity, I wanted to know, what would you recommend as the steps that CIOs or technology or even business leaders in geographies where GenAI has not been very well adopted till now? What steps do you think they need to take apart from getting their data act together, so to speak?
Yeah, this is something that we've thought about and discussed a lot internally. I mean, what they really need to take, instead of having a go, set, ready mentality, it really has to be a ready, set, go mentality. Again, this is not a black box thing where you plug it in and out comes great information. So yes, you do have to have great data. If you don't have it, it's really going to be difficult. But you also have to create expectations of what the technology can deliver. You have to make some cultural changes, and I think you also have to have a much deeper understanding of the impact of unstructured content on the entire generative AI formula for success.
So the only thing I would add, as I was mentioning earlier, is you need a spark, right? So most people will start small and then go big, and they'll do a small pilot or small test case. That's not what I'm recommending here, right? The first small use case can't be like a marginal efficiency gain. There has to be something that's exciting and dramatic, and something that you probably weren't able to do before, even if you were able to throw more resources and bodies at it. So finding that use case is really important to start out.
Absolutely.
I'll ask a question pertaining to our profession. Tom, yours and mine, not David's. How do you think AI-generated content will perform in the future? It's rapidly being used by writers to create reports, to do a whole lot of stuff which doesn't require too much of creativity. And of course, it saves time. It gets in expertise at a much lower cost, much faster. But do you think it's going to be acceptable going forward as far as trust is probably concerned? What do you see for the future?
Are we really going to go there?
We'll all lose our jobs in the long run. We're all dead, as they say. But
so I've been taking a long, hard look at this, and my feeling is that writing and the creatives and even journalism or research reports, these are areas where yes, you need data and information for context, but you're actually out there getting new information and new analysis, right? And that's something that's a little bit harder for Gen AI to do, is to get the interview and get that information from people, right?
You're right.
Yeah, I know I'm not at the core of that question, but I will say, having a journalism and a marketing background, I think that the real interesting piece around generative AI, especially around chatbot technology, is that it really forces you to ask better questions. And when you think about it, asking great questions is at the core of any journalism pursuit. That's something that, the AI outcome can't provide today, to ask the right questions or to ask the questions very specific. So I think from a journalistic or writing perspective, the ability to ask really strong, sharp questions to get good answers is also really important. And that's what people like you and Tom do on a day in, day out basis. You do ask good questions. So while the back end of sometimes the response is going to be automated, your ability as a journalist and as a researcher to ask really important questions, I think that's certainly still in 100% of your control today.
And beyond just what the question is, Gen AI doesn't have that human experience where I can relate to a source and the source can relate to me, and then we build a level of trust, and then that source feels more willing to give me information, right? And that was the case in this report. So that NSW Department of Planning, Industry and Environment that I talked about, that came after a long conversation where they felt I was going to be able to use the information accurately and within context, right?
Correct. So completely agree with you on that. There is so many more areas. There are so many more areas of contribution that, the human mind can add to content, not hopefully for a couple of years more.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but one last question: how would you how would you assess the success rate of GenAI adoption across geographies or across sectors, or by and large? What would you identify as a successful GenAI adoption for an enterprise? Is there any yardstick or any hallmark?
So we did have some stats in there. I don't have them in front of me, but we asked about the current value that they're getting from GenAI projects. I don't know if that's the question that you're asking, but it was roughly,
not just as a project, as the value it imparts for the entire business process that it is associated with. So I just wanted to know if there is a certain business process that is adopting GenAI tools within a business, within a B2B business, how would it be rated as a success or not so much of a success in terms of the efficiency that is delivered? Do you have any yardsticks? Do you have any measurement? Do you have any parameters by which we can determine if it's done well, if it has added value to the organization, or maybe cost savings, maybe increase in efficiency? Anything like that you found in your study or in your readings?
No, we didn't get into that depth. I just had a few use cases, but I didn't. Yeah. We didn't ask that question specifically. But maybe David.
Yeah, I think some of the examples I gave before clearly indicate to us that if you can cut time or improve efficiency, I think those are things. For example, if you want to use GenAI to create RFPs, requests for proposals, if you have the right data foundation, the ability to cut a 6-month process down to 2 weeks is certainly there, and we are seeing some evidence of that. But I think overall, the expectation piece, meeting the expectation, especially at the C level, is not quite there yet. And so that does go back to some of the things Tom talked about. Picking the right project, finding the right spark, as Tom talks about, those are really mission critical. You have to give a lot of thought on the front end, especially in today's world, because we're just getting our feet wet. I won't even say we're up to our waist in the GenAI water level yet, and so as we get deeper into it, better questions, better data, more careful decision making around what kinds of business problems that need to be solved, I think we'll start to see a gradual evolution toward that. But there is still a long ways to go because of the complications of the complexity of unstructured content, privacy, compliance, and those kinds of issues, and the overall trust issue.
So, the closest thing I can come to here, Kanika, is that our study did mention about, did take a look at agentic AI, AI agents improving the customer experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you put a yardstick on that because it's so new? They're gonna find what the KPI is going to be and whether they can meet that. But interesting on that AI agents to improve customer experience?
Hmm.
We asked that question, and the business leaders who are confident in their data AI readiness, 81% expect to see AI agents improving the customer experience. 81%. That's a huge number.
Yes, yes.
Only 21% of the not so confident in their data AI readiness camp said the same thing. So you're looking at 81% that are confident in their data AI readiness are looking at this. 21% compared to 21%. That's a big gap in terms of who's going to be able to take advantage of agentic AI.
Correct. So that is going to be the end of my questions, unless you think I've missed something and you'd like to add to whatever we've been talking about.
No, I appreciate it. I think it was a pretty good conversation. Appreciate the questions that you asked. Obviously, I think you're going to be pretty good at using generative AI because you are asking good questions.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.